Nope, can't win them all, I guess. And the Dodgers didn't. They dropped game two to the Mets 7-3. And a bit of an odd strategy coming into this one. My name's Ryan Bershinger. This is the Sick Podcast, The Dodger Zone. I'm going to be riding solo today, and we'll dive into this sort of weird strategy the Dodgers approached the game with that did not work out in their favor. And now they've got to head to New York with the series tied at 1. Let's get into it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Dodgers Zone.
That big strike three. Dodgers have won it all in 2020.
Fernando Valenzuela has pitched a no-hitter at 10:17 in the evening of June the 29th, 1990. If you have a sombrero, throw it to the sky.
The sickest LA Dodgers podcast. It's gonna be sick.
Yeah, like I said, weird strategy coming into this game. But before we fully dive into that, I need to share this story with you because it is rather fantastic. So, yes, typically you would have myself, Bo Benson, and Monty Bolaños here, or some sort of permutation of two out of the three. Today it's just me. Bo is busy right now, but he did find some time to send a text. As you know, we work at Fox Sports Radio. One of the hosts of Fox Sports Radio is Rich Davis, who co-hosts with Steve Covino, who Covino, huge Yankees fan, we had on the show mid-season, right before that big Dodger-Yankees series. Rich Davis is a huge Mets fan. And Bo sent a text intended for myself and Rich Davis. And it pops up on my phone, and it's to me and a number that I don't recognize. And so I text Bo, and I'm like, who's that other person that you put in this group message? And he goes, that's Rich Davis. And I'm thinking, that's weird because I have his number. Given that I produced his show, I've had to text him before I have his number. And so I said, like, you know, I could have sworn I had his number. And then he responds, he goes, oh, oops. He sent it to Joe Davis and myself, which is the funniest possible error he could have made. I have texted Joe Davis one time because he was a guest that Fox had set up for a football pregame show that I did a couple seasons ago, but I didn't save his number. Bo apparently has. And so when he went into his phone to text a Davis, he made the funniest mistake he possibly could have made. Now, luckily, this was a rare feat for Bo because it did not include any vulgarities or any any sort of insanely downtrodden nature. But yeah, now I'm sitting in a group message with myself, Bo, and Rich Davis, with Joe Davis, where Bo has unsent the two messages. And I'm just waiting for Joe to see this and wonder why these two random numbers have sent him unsent messages. He's probably assuming that it's Frank the Tank who is getting after him for being too excited about the Dodgers, despite the fact that in game one, the Mets gave Joe nothing to get excited over. And he got excited today because guess what? The Mets actually did give Joe Davis stuff to get excited about. So let's dive into that. As I eagerly await, I will keep you posted as to whether or not I get a response from Joe Davis. So yes, the Mets started things off. They led off the game with a home run, ending that consecutive scoreless inning streak for the Dodgers right at 33 innings. They just needed one out to pass that record. And Brazier was the opener for this game. Francisco Lindor fought off a few pitches, and then Ryan Brazier put it dead center, which is, not a great strategy to a guy who hits as well as Francisco Lindor does. So he put that into the bullpen, and it's a 1-0 game to start, but Brazier got out of that inning. Now, you figure, hey, one run in the top of the first is nothing to freak out over. It's you can easily get past that. 5 runs in the second inning is a little more difficult to get past. And yes, this was a bullpen game in name. But I really view this game as a Landon Knack start because that's the only real way you can explain what the strategy was going into this game. Sure, yes. Bullpen game in the essence that they used multiple relievers in this one and the starter was an opener. But they go to Knack in the second and he looked bad today, quite frankly. Guys were fouling off his pitches, but then at the same time, you go back to that Mark Vientos at bat where he hits the grand slam. And if you go to the game cast of it to see the pitch layout where the pitches were when those pitches were in the strike zone, they were all hittable pitches, and it's kind of fascinating that bat went 9 pitches because Vientos could have taken any of those deep, quite frankly. But I did not. I thought the decision to walk Lindor ahead of Vientos is perfectly fine, by the way. This isn't an Otani and Betts sort of situation. No disrespect meant to Mark Vientos, but he's definitely not in the same stratosphere as Francisco Lindor is. And you have a preferable matchup there with the righty on righty. With first base open as well, you just need one out. It gives you a force at any base. You figure Knack can kind of do anything to get out of the inning at this point. And instead, he just kind of pipes pitches until Vientos finally gets a hold of one. And that dug the Dodgers in a pretty deep hole. But what happened after that is the reason why I say this was a Landon Knack start and not a bullpen game. Because if this was a true bullpen game for the Dodgers, and this is the overall thesis statement I have for this game, Dave Roberts did not manage this game aggressively at all. He did not approach it as a must-win game. He approached it as a maybe we can steal this one game, which is a really odd decision. I mean, if you're going to do that in a 7-game playoff series, then sure, the appropriate time to do it is game 2 with a 1-0 lead. I mean, you'd probably be better doing it in game 2 or in game 3 with a 2-0 lead. But okay, you do it here in game 2. And what I find really interesting is everything that happened after that bottom of that top of the second, rather. They spoke to Dave during the inning and they asked him, hey, what are you going to do to respond? You're down 6-0. And he first off says, well, we want to keep this game close. So that way it forces the Mets to use some of their higher leverage guys, which 6-0 close game. That's a very liberal usage of that term, but okay. But then he says after that, so that way we can make sure we get a look at them. And if you listen to Dave's in-game interviews sometimes, if you read between the lines, he's actually telling you exactly what their strategy is. For example, last postseason, I remember this clearly. There was an in-game interview where they went to Dave and they asked him about what you're looking at in the game moving forward. I don't remember what the question was exactly, but he brought up the relievers and he said, we'll get to higher leverage guys, like Phillips and Trinan and Michael Grove. And he said another guy, and Gratterall, I think, was the other name he mentioned. And I remember hearing that and going, wait, hold on. He just included Michael Grove in his list of high leverage arms. That's odd because I wouldn't have really called Grove a high leverage arm at that point, and especially not now. And there was a point earlier in the season where he did have a good run. So maybe then, but not in the last few months for sure. And sure enough, in that game, Grove actually ended up being used as a high leverage arm, if I remember correctly. So looking at this game specifically, he says, we want to make sure we keep this game close so that way we can get a look at their higher leverage guys. So that way we see them. And this is Dave saying, this is the strategy that they were using in game 2. That's why you didn't see any of the high leverage guys come out in this game. That's why Landon Knack then took the mound in the 3rd inning despite giving up 5 runs. They wanted to get length from Knack because in essence, this was his start game. That's why Brent Honeywell, who pitched great, by the way, we do need to give Brent Honeywell his flowers. He ended up being the bulk inning guy that they needed in this game. And thank God he did, because he actually did keep the game close. So that way they had to go to Ryan Stanek and Edwin Diaz at the end of the game. Honeywell gave 3 very impressive innings. 5th, 6th, and 7th. He shut them down. He was missing bats. It was really, really phenomenal work. Maybe the snake scared him so much that it gave him that sort of, extra venom, if you will, an extra bite on his pitches. I'm sorry. Those are just god-awful bunts. I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry. Anyway, but looking at the overall arc of this game, it's clear that the Dodgers' strategy was to hold back on the high leverage guys, so that way, by exposing the Mets to these arms less early on in the series, maybe that pays dividends later in the series. I'm not saying that this is a great strategy. I'm just trying to make sense of what we saw today. And to me, that feels like the most logical understanding of what we saw in Game 2. Because you got no Evan Phillips, no Michael Kopech, no Blake Trinan. Daniel Hudson was unavailable today. They said that, but you take one guy out of the bullpen. Most of these guys hadn't pitched in a few days, and they have an off day tomorrow. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion is coming from us, because we figured, okay, Game 2 bullpen game, that's great. That means because of the day off between games 2 and 3, Dave is going to manage aggressively with the pen and try to basically do what they did in Game 5 with the Padres, which was an excellent strategy. And then you really put your foot on the neck of the Mets. You leave LA already up 2-0. All you got to do is just at least get one in New York, and you should be sitting pretty for the rest of the series. But they don't do that. Instead, they manage super conservatively. Landon Knack gets shelled in game 2 in the second inning, yet he goes back out there for the third, because they were kind of, I don't want to say throwing the game away. They kind of did. I mean, it was clear that at that point they said, all right, well, you know what? Let's just see if we can burn all these innings. Let's get length out of these guys and keep our higher level arms, keep them back from any sort of exposure, and you're, not using them, so you're keeping them fresher in essence. It's a weird strategy. It's a weird one, because again, this is a playoff game, and especially with the day off tomorrow, I think that's what makes it especially weird, because it set them up really nicely to manage this game as if it was a must-win game, and they simply didn't. So, does this doom the series in any way? I don't think so. I still very much feel great about the Dodgers' chances moving forward. Now in essence, you've turned it into a 5-game series with the Mets having home field advantage. And that's the one major drawback to the strategy that they employed today, is that because you saw it as a game that maybe you would steal, then now suddenly you're tossing away a home game in the series, which is a weird choice for a team that very much made it a priority to get as high of a seed as they possibly could coming into the postseason. So, yeah, just a weird one. Just a weird one. I don't find it to be fireable. I don't find it to be disgusting or whatever. I find it to be odd. Hopefully it does pay dividends later on in the series. And this is kind of where Dave's weaknesses do come out. His struggles in the postseason in the past has been that when you get to a 7-game series, he manages a bit more conservatively with the bullpen. That's what he was doing super well coming into this game, was manage use the bullpen aggressively, and he just did not do it. But because of the fact that you then went to Banda, you got those crucial 3 innings from Honeywell, and then Edgardo Enriquez in the 3-run game. Now, nothing against Enriquez. He was great in the 8th inning, and then gave up a couple hits in the 9th and had a run come around to score. But that's another odd one, right? That at that point, this very much felt more like, I don't want to say throwing in the towel as much as it was, this was their plan coming in and they stood to it regardless of really what was going on. I fully believe that Dave would have managed the game more aggressively if it was a 1-2 run game later on in the game. At 3 runs, he said, let's just keep Enriquez out there and try to get the outs with someone. The positives here, again, Brent Honeywell, phenomenal stuff today. Giving Enriquez some more experience, not just postseason experience, major league experience, because he's still in the single digits in terms of innings he's thrown in the majors. So that was good to see. And really, outside of the 5-run second, the Mets only got 2 runs off of the bullpen still. The bulk of it all came off of Landon Knack, who just did not have it today. So we move on now to Game 3, but I do want to also bring up this point. When you look at, we're really harping on the pen and everything. A big reason why they lost this game was because the offense really wasn't able to do much. You had the top 5 hitters in the order combining 0 for 19. These are future Hall of Famers at the top of this order, going 0 for 19 combined. Yeah, they're not going to win any game in which literally you don't get a single hit from the top 5 guys in this lineup. Thankfully, Tommy Edman had a great game offensively. Max Muncy hit a home run. That was great to see. Outside of that, though, this was a lot of offensive struggles in this game. And I do credit a huge part of that to Sean Manaea's performance. In the first inning, I was like, this is a completely different pitcher than who he's been his entire career. It's really impressive, and it was rather nasty to watch. At times, he was downright unhittable. But credit to the Dodgers for finding ways to at least kind of adjust and work counts later on in the game to chase him. That was big because he looked very sharp today, and they still got to him a little bit. Obviously, not enough to win, even if the Mets only got 4 runs. Obviously, like they still win that game. So the offense still wasn't where it needs to be. But I mean, Manaea looked very strong today. Obviously, the way he handled Shohei Otani kind of shows just how strong his stuff was. Just the first at bat of the game, I think he struck him out on 3 pitches in that first inning. I know he did later on as well, but he struck him out on a swing from Otani that was maybe the worst swing that any of us have ever seen Shohei Otani make. He looked absolutely fooled. He looked like he had no business trying to do anything against Manaea. And I really do credit Manaea. I know there's a lot of talk about Otani's struggles right now just because he's not hitting with guys not on base. Today he didn't hit, period, but he had 2 walks there, and those at-bats were like intentional walks, really. They very clearly tried to pitch around him with anyone who was not Sean Manaea. One of those walks, I think, did come against Manaea, but anyway, regardless, Manaea matched up against him very well. That worked incredibly well in their favor. I'm not Shohei Otani. I'm not concerned about Otani. I think he just ran into a pitcher that was very difficult for him to handle and very difficult for everyone to handle. Mookie had a bad game. And he kind of got overpowered in the 9th by Edwin Diaz, but as did Teoscar Hernandez, as did Freddie Freeman. Again, nothing from the top 5 in the order. We do have to talk about Will Smith a bit. Now, Will Smith did hit a ball really well in the 7th or 8th inning there. He hit it to the warning track, and it was unfortunately just it was caught. So it was still a very strong piece of hitting from him. Outside of that, though, he had a rough game overall. Looking at the 6th inning, where they were able to get some runs on the board, they load the bases. Will Smith comes up with I think there was bases loaded, no outs, or there was 1 out when Smith was up. And then he proceeds to pop out, I believe, is what happened. It was unfortunately just not a competitive at bat from Will Smith, and we've kind of seen that a lot from him this postseason, which is a little frustrating. I don't know if anybody's saying these sorts of things, but I know I would not go to Austin Barnes. I still would roll with Will Smith because he should be able to perform and he should be able to snap out of it somehow. And you kind of need him in there every day to get him to the point where he snaps out of it, because if the Dodgers do advance past this series, having Will Smith at a level in which he's offensively producing is super crucial to the length of this order, especially. And today, again, everybody was kind of overmatched by Manaea. I think with the right-handers on the mound for the rest of the series, you can move Smith back in the lineup a bit. He was moved up because of the lefty on the mound. Muncy was hitting 7th. You can flip the two of them against the right-handers, and that should help. But yeah, overall, I know Kike then had the double play with the bases loaded. Tommy Edman having a great game, got that 2-run single, and then Kike, they almost got away with that one. It was a close one, but on the review, yeah, it was a double play. So overall, just a rough day at the plate, but you kind of figure Sean Manaea is the exact sort of pitcher that would give the Dodgers struggle. I know that they've hit lefties better this season than they have in past years, but he's completely reinvented himself, and the way his delivery works seems to work incredibly well. So the Dodgers kind of seemed overmatched. I don't want to blame things on the timing of the game or the shadows. The shadows crept in later on in the game. Those are all factors, sure, but they're also factors that the Mets were playing with as well. So it really felt like overall like a Sunday 1:00 game in May, especially off the top. And I'm not saying that the crowd didn't do enough. It did seem way more low key than game one. I think part of that is, the middle of the day, we kind of, as Dodger fans, are very used to when we see a game looking like that. It's just, this is a getaway day. this is just a Sunday romp here. This is not anything that's super high pressure. And, it was a playoff game. So, overall, just, I think the big takeaway here is that this strategy of holding back your high leverage guys, it needs to pay dividends later on in the series, because if it does not, this is a game that we're going to look back at and go, all right, what the hell happened here? Because that was a bad call. Again, with the day off tomorrow, it's just really weird to not manage with aggressiveness in this game. If you were going to just ride Landon Knack and see how long he can go, then shouldn't he have just started? I understand that, Brazier against the top of the lineup is preferable, and then you can slot Knack in after him and kind of let him get comfortable and get acclimated in there. But yeah, didn't work. It simply didn't work. Let's see here. No response from Joe Davis. But what I will say is the text in question had to do with, if you were watching today, you may have seen the two people in highlighter yellow behind home plate smiling at the camera the whole time. I don't know if you've seen the film Smile or if you've seen previews for it. This was this was a marketing stunt for Smile 2, and they've done it in the past. I remember this was a thing that they did in previous years for the first movie at different sporting events, I think. But let's be honest for a second. kind of insane that MLB allowed that, right? Like they were there the entire game, and it's not just the staring and smiling. I'm sure that players can tune that out. It was the highlighter yellow. It was the obvious attempt to make sure that you would put your eyes to them. And I get that that's there for the viewers, but does that mess with the pitchers in any way? Honestly. And I'm not saying that the Dodgers were affected, because they were more noticeable when the Mets were pitching, because when the crowd would stand, they would stand. And now you just had two bright highlighter yellow shirts kind of off from home plate. I'm amazed that was allowed, honestly. That feels like incredibly distracting. So I'm going to take a stand. I'm not seeing that movie now. I heard that the first one was good. There's a lot of other horror that I want to get to. I don't need to see it. It's fine. All right. Well, now we go ahead to game 3 here. It should be Walker Buehler on the mound. And ideally, this is now setting themselves up where it's a good situation of, hey, let's go Buehler for 5. Some combination of Phillips, Trinan, Kopech. And then you see what happens. So this is where things will get interesting, because it's 3 games in a row. And this is, again, what makes today's strategy just kind of weird. But now, given the way that Brent Honeywell pitched today, I do wonder if we see him in bigger situations later on in the series. And hopefully that's a good thing. Hopefully he didn't give the team too much confidence in him today. He looked great. He looked phenomenal. And I don't want to spin pitching well as a bad thing. Absolutely. Hey, he was the player of the game today. He's the lone, I don't want to say the lone bright spot. Again, Tommy Edman had a great day at the plate. Pages got a hit there in the 9th inning, but I was surprised that they kept Andy Pages in once Manaea came out of the game, or even after I think Pages got out to end the 5th inning or the 4th inning. And I thought that was the point where it was like, all right, now you put in Kiermaier, because you get that defense for a bulk of the game. And it's another 9 spots in the order until you get back to him. So he probably isn't going to face Manaea again. He's probably going to face a right-handed pitcher at that point. So you'd like to have Kiermaier in at that spot. So I was surprised to see him in all game, but it was good that he then was able to get a hit in the 9th, and hopefully that gives him something to build on. So I don't know. I'm looking for things for the Dodgers to build on after game 2, because that was definitely a weird one. I don't think it damns the series by any means. They weren't going to sweep the Mets in 4. They probably could have, but they weren't going to. And the Mets weren't exactly dominant today. Sean Manaea was excellent. But also their offense, I think, really just kind of took advantage of a pitcher who was just outright bad today. Outside of that, they did not do a ton offensively. So I don't know how much that bodes for their offensive performance moving forward. I'm just trying to find things for us to build on here. I'm trying to find something to work with. So as we get into game 3, if the Dodgers, again, we now have to, I mean, I guess they don't have to. They could win all 3 in New York, but you're looking at bringing this series back to LA at this point. So you gotta at least get 1 in New York. Ideally, you're getting at least 2, but feel free to take all 3 of them and come back here for the World Series. That's fine. That's totally fine. Just get used to these cross-country flights, because if you're looking at the Yankees in the World Series, you're going to have to do it again. Cleveland is pretty far, too. That's a very interesting series. I think people are not talking enough about how good Cleveland actually is. It almost feels like a foregone conclusion that the Yankees are just going to win this series and go to the World Series. I don't know. I don't know. I would pick the Yankees to win the series for sure. But Cleveland's got a very strong team. Their bullpen is phenomenal. Jose Ramirez is a star, and they've got guys like Lane Thomas, who is the trade deadline acquisition that people aren't going to think about, and suddenly he's producing at a high level in the postseason. They've got things there that work out for them, but I would still assume I would pick the Yankees to win that series, but I again don't think it's a foregone conclusion. All right, one last time, huh? One last time. Nothing from Joe Davis. The text in question was something along the lines of Steve Cohen hired crisis actors with the tweet to the tweet of the smile two people in the back. I wish he didn't unsend it. I wish Joe is just, what's this? I got this weird text the other day. That's a shame. Joe, if you'd like to come on the podcast, you're more than welcome. More than welcome. Maybe come on next time when I'm by myself, so we don't have to make people struggle through this, huh? Seriously, if you've checked this out today, really appreciate it. We've been having a ton of fun doing this throughout the postseason, and way more people have been giving us attention than we deserve. So it's very kind. And if you've been watching today, really appreciate it. If you've been listening today, if you've listened at any point throughout the season, thank you so much. Really, really means a ton. So for Bo Benson, for Monty Bolaños, who was not at the game today. No. So maybe that's the problem. She was at game 5 against the Padres. She was at game 1 of the series. So damn it, we're sending Monty to New York. Sorry, Monty, but it's just going to have to be this way. I'm not going to pay for it, but scrounge up some savings. I'm sure you can do it. This is the Sick Podcast, the Dodgers Zone. Still 7 to go. 4 down, 7 to go. So domo arigato, everyone. Thank you very much. We'll see you after game 3.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, the Dodgers Zone, on YouTube, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.